Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our studies of 1 Samuel. Today we're in 1 Samuel chapter 26, and here Saul has once again come after David. He receives word in verse 1 from the Ziphites that David is hiding in the hills around them, and he is going to gather his army and go after David. So let's look at some of the lessons that we can see from 1 Samuel chapter 26. The first one has to do with this fact that Saul is coming after David, because here Saul reneges on his promise. Remember the last time when David saved his life spared his life in the cave and did not kill him when he had the opportunity. Saul makes the statement that he will not come after David anymore. That's going to last for a period of time. It's going to last for a few years. But here Saul is once again going to come after David. He is going to bring 3,000 men with him, and he is once again going to try to capture and kill the anointed one of God. And with this, Saul is going to prove that his word cannot be trusted. Saul is going to show that David cannot take heed. He cannot become comfortable no matter what Saul says, because even though Saul says something, he is liable to go back on it at any time. Certainly, this is one of the areas where people can lose their influence. When you say you're going to do something, and then you turn back on it a little while later, or you change your mind under different circumstances, then the only thing that you've done is prove to the people around you that they cannot actually trust you. That when you say you will do something, they have to take it with a grain of salt. When they say that you will or won't follow through with a certain thing, then there will always be a question mark in the back of their mind. Integrity is important. And Saul here loses yet another piece of his integrity by once again breaking his promise and going after David. But the second thing that we notice here is found down in verse 9, because Abishai is going to plead with David to allow him to just go ahead and end it. Once again, there's going to be the pleas to go ahead and get rid of Saul. And David makes the statement once again in this verse. He says, "Do not destroy him, for who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" David says you can't destroy the one that God has put in place and be innocent and be guiltless. He says only God can do that. And God has not chosen to remove Saul from his place. God has not commanded David to remove Saul from his place. And therefore, as long as Saul retains his position, as long as God leaves him in that position, David will not touch him. There is a respect for the Lord's authority that David is going to once again illustrate. You know, David could have gone back and said, well, Saul broke his promise to me, and therefore he's no longer hands off. And yet he doesn't do that, because David has enough respect for God to recognize that when God has put someone in a position, it is not his authority to remove him from it. He doesn't have that right. He does not have that power. And so we see David's reminder here in verse 9. But then dropping down to the end of the chapter, I want us to notice David's statement to Saul toward the end of the chapter. He says to Saul, "May the Lord repay every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord delivered you into my hand today, but I would not stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed." David says, let the Lord repay each man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. Now, intrinsic in that statement is the fact that he will also repay each man for his lack of righteousness and his lack of faithfulness, which is also part of what he's saying. Let him repay me for my righteousness and faithfulness, and you for your lack of righteousness in going back on your promises yet again. God will repay each man according to what he does. We have the same sentiments being utilized in the New Testament in passages such as 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 10, and various other places where God will bring every man into judgment for the things that he has done, whether they are good or evil. David here serves yet another reminder of the fact that the Lord will judge and will repay each man for his deeds. These are some of the things that I found in 1 Samuel chapter 26. There are certainly other things that we could discuss, but I hope these have been beneficial to you. Next time, we will come back and we will begin examining 1 Samuel 27. But until then, have a great day.